Hello, and welcome to Navigating Divisive Politics in the Workplace. My name is Andrea Diaz, and I just want to say a quick welcome to all who clicked on this quick workshop today. Maybe you are an HR professional looking for ideas on how to navigate this challenging time. Maybe you're a manager, leadership who feels uncomfortable managing conflict in the workplace. Whatever your situation may be, I'm hoping this quick 20 to 25-minute workshop will help provide you with some insight for the current laws in place to protect both you, the employer, and your employees, as well as give you some tools to keep your workplace harmonious during this time. So, very quickly, I just want to introduce myself a little bit more. My company is Dominica. We are located in Seattle, though I do serve clients nationwide. Dominica came out of my 10 plus years working with nonprofits, and then before that, working with startups. What I noticed between working with these two groups is there's a lot of commonalities. First of all, both groups have large budget constraints. They don't have like resources like legal teams or millions of dollars that they can pay off settlements for when faced with a lawsuit. They also are required, both groups are usually required to fulfill some kind of higher standards when it comes to compliance and what is required of their workplaces based on their funding requirements. Both groups are also extremely vulnerable. So if you are a new business owner today, on watching this video on YouTube, this is for you. So, one L&I violation or one lawsuit can potentially put you out of business. I have witnessed L&I violations up to 200K. That's a lot of money to pay out to the government, just for something that could have been easily preventable had you done your homework and fulfilled your requirements as an employer having employees. So, this is a great training for you today. The creation of Dominica was to bring HR and safety a more approachable approach, a more approachable approach, more affordable, more on call, so you don't have to hire HR full time. You can have me when you need me, as more of a preventative tool if you're a startup and looking for just that strategical partner. Or, yeah, if you're a small business owner and just want to schedule a quick call, do I even want to hire employees? I don't know. I'll give you a lot of considerations to take in before you make these big decisions, and it will typically save you time, money, and stress in the long run. So, through my website, which is listed right there, I'm always providing free resources. I have a monthly newsletter. That's the only thing I send out monthly through my website. It has just the most up to date employment news. And then it also has like these monthly workshops, just like this one, that I always offer for free on a variety of HR and compliance topics. Um, so yeah, this is everything that I provide, all the variety of services. Um, if you're a startup, I am looking for an advisory role right now, for a different type of compensation just to help, be a strategical partner. So reach out to me. Also, if you have any questions today, if you are left stumped after this training or have more concerns, let me know. So I do have some training opportunities, coming up. This training is currently, as it's being posted, so I'm going to post it today, which is the 22nd of October. As it's being posted, I am actually hosting this training every Wednesday until the Wednesday after Election Day. So that's something to keep in mind if you would like to attend this workshop, free and live. Um, or if you want to send your employees to take a look at it, send your team to take a look at it, or they can always watch this pre recording on YouTube. Um, We also have a QR code at the end of the training today that will link you to all of this. Some related workshops I also provide: de escalation, which is a very important one when we're also talking about conflict in the workplace, diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI, anti harassment, anti discrimination training, civil workplace and conflict resolution. So these are going to be like your related workshops to this topic presented today. Think of this training today as more of an outline of what your rights are as an employer, what your employees, what rights that they have when it comes to political standing in the workplace. And then also just some recommendations that I personally would recommend if you were my client, to some action items that you can do right before the election day or to kind of plan for the election day. So, other offerings I do. So any kind of L&I required training, safety training. Active shooter response is one of my most popular ones. This is not currently in Washington State, where I reside and where my business is. This is not currently a requirement, but if you are a viewer today that you live in California, just this year, your state passed a law requiring workplace violence prevention plans. And this could be a great addition to your violence prevention plan is this training. Active shooter response training is not just the response, it's the prevention and detection. So seeing if someone is um, what symptoms they may exhibit before interacting in a violent event is a good portion of what we spend during this training on. So we talk a lot about that prevention and detection, as well as other required safety training. So yeah, reach out to me. So, why are we in this presentation today? Why is it important? Well, like I said, today's presentation, it might be a little bit different than what you were anticipating because we're going to be talking about not only the negative impact of conflict following politics in the workplace, but we're going to also be talking about what your rights are of your employer as an employer, what your rights, the rights of your employees, um, and what you can do also as a business owner and an employer to mitigate these potential risks and conflicts to maintain a harmonized and productive workplace during this challenging time. And it is a challenging time. So, why it's important is Littler 2024 annual employer survey report confirmed that 87% of employers express concern with managing divisive politics and social beliefs among their employees leading up to the election. So this is why I provided this free training, is because a lot of employers are concerned about it and I don't blame them. Political speech in the workplace has been a growing concern for employers in recent years. It used to be an untouchable subject in the workplace. It is not like that currently, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Um, it's also a very polarizing political climate right now, combined with the use of social media and digital communication. It has just amplified the visibility and impact of employees' political views. And while political discourse can foster div- a diverse and inclusive workplace, it also poses challenges for employers. Balancing the employee rights with the need to maintain a harmonious and productive workplace, it really requires this nuanced approach, which we'll be talking about today. So, what can happen when political discussions go wrong? So, oftentimes, political talk is emotionally charged, and we know this. It can distract from the workplace, and harm relationships. It can also um, lead to a decrease of productivity if you have a lot of conflict, increase of employee turnover, and even potential lawsuits if the issues are not managed correctly. I know sometimes with some employers that I've worked with in the past. Um, or just where I live in Seattle, there is a sentiment here that we try to avoid conflict at all cost, um, which as a business owner, as an employer, as a manager, this is not a great strategy when it comes to conflict in your workplace. If you just wipe your hands clean, you can be on the hook for negligence if something occurs, which we will talk about. On the other side of the spectrum, we don't want to restrict political discourse in the workplace either. So this is kind of new within the last 10 years here. We're really noticing a shift where employees want to talk about politics because they are connected with social causes that they firmly believe in. And they are really anticipating that as an employer, you take a stance or you allow for this discourse. And we've actually seen the reverse where the employers that don't allow for this discourse actually causes bad employee morale, mistrust, backlash. So you might have, because you restrict the employees talking about it at the workplace, maybe they talk about it in the parking lot. It makes matters worse because you can't really manage that conflict. And then it can just escalate from there. And then missed opportunity for dialogue as well. It can also negatively impact your diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts as an employer. We want workplaces with a diversity of ideas, a diversity of backgrounds, because that's what's going to improve your problem solving and lead to higher productivity as an employer, as a company. So we really don't want to take away from that by telling people that because they have opposing views that they can't work together, right? So what are maybe your employer responsibilities when it comes to political discourse? You must be aware of what's protected under law and where policies can be enforced. So I know in the workplace, it's hard as a manager too, as HR. You're probably wearing so many hats right now. You're probably in charge of so many different things. Well, you also have to be kind of an expert when it comes to employment law in your city, your state, and what federal law is as well. If you don't know, if you do not know what's currently going on, because they're constantly changing, there are tons of resources that you can reach out to, myself including. Now that we're acquainted, you could always reach out to me if you have any questions. But yeah, we get new laws every year. Every year, your state will probably get a new law that affects your workplace. We'll talk and give some examples of that law when it comes to Washington state specifically, but I have a nation map that's on the next slide of the entire US. So uh, you must maintain and update your required policies regularly. Remember when I just said that state laws and city laws changes all the time? Well, every time there's a change, your policies need to be updated. Your employee handbooks need to be updated. If they haven't been updated within the last, I don't know, 5 years, that needs to happen. There is a lot that has happened in the last 5 years. And this just helps to that it helps you maintain compliance and mitigates the risk of L&I, labor and industries, knocking on your door, giving you violations later down the line because you didn't have what you're required to have in your employee handbook. That's something I can also help out on, or any HR support can help. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So employers must prevent political discussions from turning into discriminatory actions or harassment. Example, targeting someone based on their political beliefs, which could be tied to religion, gender, or race. So where we're familiar with Title VII is it talks a lot about our protected classes in the workplace: veteran status, gender, sexual identity, religion, etc., race, etc. Um, Political affiliation is not a protected class. However, there is distinct language in that law, federal law, that Employers must prevent political discussions from turning into discriminatory actions or harassments. So that's what I said. You really can't wipe your hands clean as an employer, as a manager, as an HR staff. You can't say, "Oh, they'll figure it out. They're adults. They'll figure out their own conflict." Because if it escalates and leads to any of that action, any of that discriminatory harassment action, you could be on the hook. Risk of noncompliance, risk of potential lawsuits, grievances, L&I violations once again, if a business fails to manage political conflict effectively. So, what are the current laws that, first of all, protect employers and then protect employees? Well, here's a map. I'm going to talk a lot about Washington State because that's where I reside. That's where a lot of my clients are. But you could take a look at this map and maybe you're in one of the states highlighted. Maybe you're in the gray section here that has no protections. But I want to first mention the most popular law that everyone feels like it exemplifies every right they have, which is freedom of speech. So everyone brings up freedom of speech when it comes to this. And freedom of speech, your First Amendment right, it primarily is a prevention on certain restrictions of speech imposed through the government. It does not extend to a private workplace. You do not have your freedom of speech right when you work at a private workplace. Now, if you're a government employee, you potentially have that right? Because the government is your employer. So you probably have an excess of that, and they probably have different policies that go with this. So, keeping that in mind, freedom of speech does not extend to your private employer. And in Washington state, we are an at will employment state. So, your employer can end the terms of your employment at any time without any reason, same as an employee can end their terms of employment at any time with an employer. They don't have to provide 2 weeks. They don't have to provide anything for any reason, because it is an at-will state. Um, we have several laws in Washington that protect employers and employees. So the first one I want to mention is SB 5778, which is a new one that we just acquired this year. It makes Washington the sixth state in the nation to prohibit employers from disciplining or firing employees who refuse to attend meetings about employer political or religious views. It asserts that the employers may not do the following. You cannot enforce that employee attend an event to talk about an employer's stance on a political issue, or a religious political matter or a religious matter. You cannot request or require that your employees listen to a speech or view an email addressing specific political stances. You just cannot make it required. And you can also not retaliate against an employee for making a report of the violation of this law as well. In Washington, we also have a law that's under RCW 42.17A.495, which prohibits employers from discriminating against an employee for failing to oppose or support a political candidate, ballot proposition, political party, or political committee. If you are an employer operating in Seattle, there are slightly more restrictions. So there is a city ordinance that prohibits employers from imposing different treatment upon employees based on political ideology. This ordinance prevents employers from treating an employee differently based on a membership in a political group or on a employee's political beliefs as well. So if you are an employer that is not in Washington state or is in Washington state as well, you need to keep both state statutes, city statutes, and sometimes county ordinances in mind when you're creating and enforcing policies. So, uneven enforcement of policies along political lines can lead to liability under these laws as well. If you have any questions about the laws I just spoke about today, or if you want to see if they change in the next year or so, please reach out to me and I'm happy to help. If you live in another state and don't know what's going on in your state as well, happy to help there as well. So, what can you do? Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed at this point and you're like, oh, I feel powerless. What can you do? My biggest thing is policy setting. Policy setting is always your best friend as an employer because it is something you can really rely on if something escalates and occurs, a lawsuit occurs, a government violation happens, an employee complains about you to the government, places a claim. Um, Policies can really come in handy because you can show them and say, we have a policy. The employee was given this policy. They signed off on this policy. It's very clearly here that this is our code of conduct and this is how we work here. These are the expectations we set. So it really does help with you mitigate that risk for liability. The first thing is a required anti-harassment policy. In most states, this is a requirement if you have 8 or more employees. In Washington specifically, actually in Washington state specifically, it's 8 or more employees. I don't know how many employees in your state it is required. If you have any employees, this is something I recommend as necessary. Um, it's only going to protect you in the long run. It's something I really recommend. So, when a policy is required, it's not just a written policy. We do not allow for anti-discrimination, anti-harassment, right? It's not just a written policy. There's several things that are required once a policy is required. So here's an example in Washington state. You have to have a zero tolerance, right? You must address that it's a zero tolerance. There has to be a complaint procedure listed. Um, it allows employees to raise complaints also without fear or retaliation. So a lot of times that's where my work comes into play because employees and employers prefer to have a third party, unbiased, that allows employees to directly reach out to them and they don't have to reach out to their manager, right? Because what if their manager is the one harassing them? So they like to reach out to an outside source who that person would then conduct the investigation, which is actually the next required thing. You have to have some kind of investigation procedure that follows the complaint. That's a requirement as well. Training, you have to have training on your policy. um, employee rights. You have to inform your employees in the policy and during the training what their rights are. And then you must provide them with a list of resources, not just local resources, but federal resources like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is something you have to list as well. I always recommend a social media and technology use policy. Businesses can define then their boundaries in their social media about acceptable online behavior related to the company. Um, it's really hard to police employees' personal Facebook, Instagram, TikTok pages, right? That's the relevant social media stuff now, but who knows? In a few months, it could be something additional to that, right? And that's not their job. But you can have clear expectations in your employer handbook that says that if the employee chooses to represent you as an employer on their social media, they have to behave accordingly. They cannot have, a something on their hat that would offend many people and then wear your company logo, which, you know, this is this is a specific situation that actually has happened. So, yeah, it can get sticky if you don't have a policy to refer back to. right? Technology use policy too. How are your employees using your company technology right now? Are they allowed to send personal messages? This is something I would not recommend. I would also not recommend that they use their personal devices to talk about work, especially if you have hourly employees, because you have to pay your hourly employees every single time they work. So if they are texting their manager and they're not supposed to be working and they're an hourly employee, and the manager and the employees going back and forth on their text messaging on their personal phones, that is considered work time. So I would strongly recommend not doing that and saving the business technology for business use, personal technology for personal use. Also, in some states or cities, you might be required to pay for personal technology devices if your employees have to use them. But that's something that you have to see if it's in your current uh, ordinances where you live. I also think training, code of conduct policy. A lot of people kind of roll their eyes at this one because they're like, why do we have to have a policy to tell people how they are to conduct themselves at work and to be professional? And what I have to say to that is what's common sense to you is not common sense to all. So it's great to have a code of conduct policy as well. And then training on all these policies is something that you can also do as an employer to mitigate risk. So here are the recommendations that I have that if I was an employer, I would do leading up to the election. I would update my current policies. I would seek employee feedback. So, this is pretty important. This is something that you should be doing regularly if you are in HR, a manager, an employer, etc. Actively soliciting feedback from your employees regarding the effectiveness of your policies. Very important. This helps you assess workplace culture as well, helps you detect if there's any underlying conflict that's going on between your employees or if there's a barrier between your employee and their performance. And, surveys are great, but one on ones are 80% better. I mean, 100% better. I always recommend one on ones. These can be done as often as you'd like, at least quarterly. And basically, you're just sitting one on one with your employee. You're not scalding them if they're doing poorly at their job. You're allowing them time to talk to you and give you their feedback of what boundaries maybe stand in their way, what concerns they have, where they see their growth in your company. Maybe there's a class they want to take, an additional training they want to have, etc. This will only help you in the long run. It will really help with your staff retention. I would send an email reminder to my employees and say, hey, remember we have this, election day is coming. I know everyone knows it can be a challenging time. I just want to remind you of all the policies that we have in place to protect each other, to make sure that our workplace remains harmonious and productive. This is how we're expecting you all to act as adults. Don't have political discourse in front of clients. That's something I wouldn't recommend. Maybe don't have it during team meetings. There's a time and a place to use it appropriately. So I would also maybe follow this up with a team meeting or do a team meeting and then follow it up with an email reminder, telling everyone what you talked about in the team meeting just to give a little reminder. You could do a manager training because your managers are going to be the example. They need to set the tone, set the example for this time. And then de escalation is always something that I recommend utilizing de escalation training. So before we come to our summary, I just want to provide a specific Ask HR scenario because I want to give a little bit of insight of why in HR we cannot usually answer things so black and white. Because if you asked me a specific question, and this is why I'm encouraging you at the end of this training today to reach out to me if you have any specific questions or concerns. Again, happy to help. But when you give me a question or concern, I'm going to have a few questions back for you in order to form, an educated solution for you. So a question I've been asked before is, can my employee have a political sign in their personal office spaces? Well, there's a ton of questions I would ask back for you. Are the offices client facing? If they are, probably something I wouldn't recommend. A lot of times your clients just want to come to you to get a problem fixed, to get a service done, and they hear so much about politics already in their life, if they don't live under a rock, that maybe they don't want to come in to their local car repair and hear all about it either. Right? Um, Pretty relatable. What is your current policy on office conduct? Do you have any policies about how people are supposed to keep their office spaces? Um, what is the level of distraction? Your employee feedback comes into play with this. Is it distracting everybody? Is it making one person really, really upset, and kind of weighing your options from there? But once you have your decision, I just want to make a note that your decision and resolution has to be standardized and equal for all. So if you make one person remove a political sign from their office, everybody has to remove similar signs from their offices as well. That's important to note. So here's all the information that we went over today. It's important to correctly manage political discussions proactively, ensuring your business have the right policies and strategies in place. It could only improve your business and give you some benefits here: improve morale, increase productivity, DEI, reduce legal risk. I provided some recommendations for you all. And this is my contact information once again. So if this is really too quick for you, if you want this training privately for you and your team, let me know. If you have any additional comments or concerns, let me know. And then that QR code and my website will link you all to fabulous free newsletters, trainings, affordable resources for you. And I hope to talk to you all again soon. Please stay safe. Thank you.